Sky News with Alan King and Paula Middlehurst.
Good evening and welcome to Sky News. After 101 years of car making, it seems to be the end of the road for MG Rover tonight.
It's been announced that the troubled firm is calling in the receivers after it failed to strike a deal with a Chinese car maker.
MG Rover is Britain's last remaining bulk car manufacturer. It employs 6,000 people at Longbridge.
And as well as those jobs, a further 20,000 people are now in jeopardy in companies which supply parts and components.
The company had been losing huge amounts of money, not helped by a 17% drop in sales in March compared to a year ago.
It's the news staff leaving at the end of their shift had been dreading. Now, after more than 100 years of car making at Longbridge, confirmation that MG Rover is going into administration. And the deal with the Chinese car giant that employees had hoped would secure the future of their plant has been scrapped.
This is a devastating blow to everybody involved, the workers and their families, the company's suppliers and the wider community. And our thoughts are with them tonight. Everybody recognised that a partnership with SIAC, the Chinese company, was critical to the future of MG Rover. And that is why MG Rover, the government and the trade unions worked tirelessly around the clock to secure this deal.
But it wasn't enough. The production line had already ground to a halt after suppliers withheld vital parts over fears they wouldn't be paid. One company which makes door frames claims it's owed nearly £1 million already. Hope had still remained, however, that a bridging loan of more than £100 million from the government would help tempt the Shanghai Automotive Corporation to go ahead with the proposed deal. But even with that cash injection, they said they were not confident about the future solvency of MG Rover. Rover employees are used to the ups and downs of the company's troubled history. It first started producing cars in 1904, but hit serious problems in 2000. In March of that year, it was broken up by its owner BMW after losing £2 million a day. The profitable Land Rover was sold to Ford, while BMW kept the modern Mini at the Cowley plant. In May 2000, the British consortium Phoenix bought what was left for £10 and created MG Rover. The timing couldn't be much worse for a Labour Party hoping to win marginal seats in and around Birmingham. MG Rover has 6,000 employees. Many more jobs are in jeopardy at firms that provide components for the plant.
The unions now are, as Patricia said, fighting to preserve car manufacturing at the plant, and we will be working with the government to try our best to minimise job losses amongst our members.
Details of a support package are to be announced soon, but staff will have a long wait to find out if there's real hope their jobs can be salvaged from the wreckage. Emma Birchley, Sky News.
Sky's business editor Michael Wilson joins us now on the phone. Michael, there's no denying the appalling situation this leaves people who work for the company in, but as far as the overall picture is the British economy, it's only fair to say, isn't it, the company's a minnow?
Unfortunately, it is really. Out of about 400,000 cars leaving showrooms in 2000 last year, the Rover cars about 6,600, and even with another 5,900 MG, so basically they got about 3% of the market. Now, if this is indeed the case and it's going into administration, a lot of people will be saying that BMW, who sold the whole company for £10, actually got the better end of the deal. It's really, unfortunately, too small to count as a volume manufacturer. British-built, for example, Nissans, Toyotas, Hondas ensure that our car exports exceed our imports. So, and also Vauxhall, for example, is owned by General Motors. I mean, they are playing in extremely big waters. They don't have the size to do that. I was told by somebody the other day, it's a bit like a sort of adolescent child. It's too big to be small and too small to be big. There are 1.65 million cars built in the UK, 14,000 car workers in Birmingham. These people, generally speaking, apart from those who work directly for MG Rover, have gone into the top end of engineering design. That's where the future is. It's just crazy for companies to try so people in the car manufacturing industry to try to beat China, for example, on price. They just can't do it. Neither can they beat Eastern Europe on price. That's the difference. And they just simply, unfortunately, did not sell the cars.
Michael, briefly, if you would, explain to us what going into receivership, bringing in the administrators, actually means on a practical level.
Well, on a practical level, it means that the assets of the company are disposed to the highest buyer, for the highest bidder, for those people who actually come in and want to buy them. What they would get from MG Rover, I suspect, a production line, lots of technical expertise, but it's not doing its models. It won't be making the cars, or maybe somebody might want to come into an engineering situation in Britain. I can't see it myself, and a lot of experts are saying exactly the same kind of thing. I think what we're seeing here is, and it's a terrible thing to say, but it is the last of, it isn't volume manufacturer because the numbers aren't there, but big time manufacturer tried to be and simply didn't make it. It is, if this indeed happens, it'll be very sad. And just one thing, Alan, don't forget, of course, that the government kept this almost like a sort of national treasure because there are 6 marginal Labour-held seats in the area. They allowed the company to defer its VAT payments and also to keep its employee NI national insurance contributions. So there is a lot going on here. The government is caught in a terrible position because it didn't want to be seen, I guess, to be giving money to a Chinese manufacturer to come in, but at the same time didn't want to be deserting its key marginal seats. So I won't comment on the political implications of that. Industrially, economically, BMW got the better deal, it seems, at the moment.
A sad day indeed. Michael Wilson, very many thanks.
Well, let's get the political implications for you now and take you live to Westminster, where John Craig is assessing the political fallout from this. And fallout it is too, John. An unexpected left hook for Labour tonight, really, just on the day they were pushing the strong economy message.
That's right, the timing could hardly be worse. I suppose if it came a week or so before polling day, it might be a bit worse. But government ministers are stressing tonight they pulled out all the stops. Let me just tell you how this has come about tonight. Throughout the day, the Rover has been on the brink of this deal collapsing, on the brink of going bust. Around about lunchtime today in the House of Commons, Patricia Hewitt was talking about the bridging loan still being on the table. She was rather tetchy when she was being questioned by MPs. And then this evening, I was talking to the MP for Birmingham Northfield around about 6-7 o'clock. He was saying to me he still thought a deal could be done. Well, shortly after that, he and trade union leaders like Tony Woodley were summoned to the Department of Trade and Industry and to be told the worst, basically, by Patricia Hewitt. We journalists, political journalists, were summoned there just before 10 o'clock. And when we got there was a room full of Patricia Hewitt, DTI civil servants, big trade union leaders like Tony Woodley, MPs, senior Downing Street officials. That's how serious it was. And we learned the news that we heard in Emma's report from Patricia Hewitt. But politically, the government has tried everything, they say. For example, Tony Woodley revealed tonight that the Prime Minister, who he met last night at Labour's NEC election meeting, the Prime Minister phoned the Chinese Premier last night, a last-ditch appeal from Tony Blair. We know that, of course, Gordon Brown went to China earlier this year. He met the Chinese Premier and Finance Minister. He lobbied them. And Patricia Hewitt said tonight that she sent a team of her civil servants over to China last week. So the stakes were enormously high, but at the end of the day, it's all failed because the Chinese have looked at the books and they can't make a profit. They can't make it work. Now, what's going to happen from now on is that the government is saying that they want to try and salvage some car maker, future car manufacturing at Longbridge, Pat Hewitt said in her statement. She's believed that she will go up to Birmingham tomorrow. They will announce a rescue package of some sort for the workers, and the government is clinging to this hope that they can continue some form of car manufacturing at Longbridge. But it looks a pretty slim hope, and with just a few weeks to go to polling day, in fact it's 4 weeks today, May the 5th, it's a devastating blow for all those people in the West Midlands who of course are going to cast their vote on May the 5th.
And how do you think those 6 marginal Labour seats are going to fare? Is it easy to guess at this stage, the fallout of this?
they're not as marginal as they once were. I mean, for example, Birmingham Northfield, Richard Burden's constituency, he's the MP who's been leading questions. He put a question to Tony Blair yesterday and again to Patricia Hewitt today. His seat is reasonably safe. The one next door, Gisela Stewart, former minister, that's Edgbaston, that's pretty marginal. There's another seat in Birmingham, Estelle Morris's old seat, she's standing down. Liberal Democrats have got their sights on that seat. But it's not just Birmingham, of course. A lot of MPs tonight have made the point that car manufacturing isn't just Birmingham, it's the whole of the West Midlands, the whole culture. And, I mean, we've quoted a figure of 15,000 jobs from the component firms. Some MPs I've talked to have put the figure much higher than that, 25,000. So potentially we're talking about a possibility of 30,000 jobs. That is a huge blow for a major industrial region like the West Midlands. It's a terrible blow, and of course it's come a month or so, 4 weeks before polling day.
John Craig, thank you.
Religious and political leaders from all over the world are in Rome for the funeral of the Pope tomorrow.
Well, an hour ago, the doors of St Peter's Basilica were closed, disappointing thousands of pilgrims who'd been queuing to pay their last respects. Many are now settling down for a night in the open, securing the best place to view the Pontiff's final journey.
The Archbishops of Westminster and Canterbury, divided by their denominations, but united by their reverence for the Holy Father. Anglican leader Rowan Williams and Catholic Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, fellow pilgrims in a city teeming with them.
I feel so blessed and so grateful to God, really grateful to God to be here, because it was so difficult to get here. It took us 3 days in all to get tickets.
Some of those paying homage are sleeping rough, staking places for a funeral like no other. Many have blankets, but few seemed aware or prepared for the anticipated wet weather. The funeral will be a virtual experience for the vast majority of pilgrims. Only a fraction will be allowed inside St. Peter's Square. The rest will watch proceedings on 25 giant television screens dotted across Rome, like this one at the Colosseum. Up to 1 million Poles may be here for the funeral. These miners remember the help John Paul gave to the Solidarity movement in its infancy.
We had lost a very important person for all of us, a person, I suppose, a person like a second father, and a very important person not only for this religious way of life, but also for whole Poland and our society. And so.
From above, it's clear where many of the new arrivals are going. The city's hotels are full, and these campsites have been filling up. The helicopters aren't just taking pictures. These gunships and jet fighters have been circling Vatican City, the world's smallest state, ready to welcome the biggest collection of world leaders ever drawn to a funeral before. At ground level, Patriot missile batteries are watching the skies. Air Force officers say they can react to any threat within seconds. The Pope thought about burial in Poland according to his just published will, written over the course of his pontificate and full of personal observations. It suggests he thought about resigning 5 years ago, the Church's Jubilee year. Paradoxically, with his body now lying in ornate splendour, the Pope's will reveals he had no material possessions to hand on. Colin Brazier, Sky News, the Vatican.
And of course we'll have full coverage of the Pope's funeral on Sky News with Jeremy Thompson and Anna Botting presenting live from Rome tomorrow, starting at 8 in the morning.
Now then, one of the first things that Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles will do as man and wife is say sorry.
The royal couple will officially repent their sins of the blessing of their marriage at Windsor Castle. They'll acknowledge their sins and wickedness, and Charles will then pledge to be faithful to his new wife.
When it comes to admitting your sins by prayer, the words don't get any stronger than these.
We acknowledge and bewail our manifold sins and wickedness, which we, from time to time, most grievously have committed by thought, word and deed.
But they're the words Charles and Camilla will be uttering here at St George's Chapel on Saturday. Diana once said, there were 3 of us in the marriage, but with this prayer, Charles and Camilla will be hoping that it'll encourage forgiveness from many traditionalists. This was Prince Charles on one of his last official engagements before the big day on Saturday. Details of the guest list for the blessing have also emerged. Much of it reads like a who's who of British celebrity. Among those invited, Jilly Cooper, Joanna Lumley, Jules Holland, Prunella Scales and Sting. But it all comes after yet another major security scare. This was the moment the flaws in security at Windsor were exposed. With a fictitious delivery note, the two men entered the castle with frightening ease, waved through by police with barely a glance. As they drove inside, they filmed from the window, passing parts of the castle where the royal family are staying.
My name's Alex Peake, I'm a journalist for the Sun newspaper, and with some bogus paperwork I've managed to get into Windsor Castle.
The hired van could have contained enough explosives to have devastated the castle and killed the Queen.
I'm certainly concerned, I'm certainly irritated. I don't want to prejudge this because obviously we've got disciplinary processes to go through, but it looks to me as though somebody's done something very stupid. Perhaps it's a useful wake-up call, but I would not have expected my organisation to need a wake-up call.
This security lapse is another major embarrassment. A £5 million security barrier was set up after Aaron Barshak gate-crashed Prince William's 21st birthday party. Now, after another more serious security breach, the royal family could do worse than to pray for improved security when they tie the knot on Saturday. Martin Popplewell, Sky News.
Let's update with our top stories this hour. The government has announced that MG Rover is going into receivership after it failed to strike a deal with a Chinese car manufacturer. The firm employs 6,000 people at its Longbridge plant, and more than 20,000 other jobs are thought to rely on it.
Thousands of mourners are preparing to spend the night in the open in Rome ahead of the Pope's funeral tomorrow. Tonight, the doors of the Basilica were closed after an estimated 2 million people had paid their last respects to the Pontiff.
And Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles will officially repent their sins after they marry. The passage of penitence will be read at the chapel blessing.
Tomorrow's weather, it'll be a bitter northerly wind sweeping wintry showers down through all of Britain and Ireland. Some snow in places on higher ground, particularly further north.
Let's take a look now at the morning newspapers for you. We'll start with The Independent, and as expected, the demise of Rover makes the front pages. The Independent illustrating over 100 years of Rover car making.
The Guardian too leads with the troubles at MG Rover, suggesting the car manufacturer will have no option but to close. It also looks to the Pope's funeral and the flood of dignitaries due to attend.
Rover finally stalls, proclaims the Times newspaper. The car maker's woes again the lead there. It also pictures the mass of pilgrims gathered in Rome ahead of the Pope's funeral tomorrow.
MG Rover also dominates the front page of the Telegraph with the halting of production at its Longbridge plant. And it suggests that Labour has been hit by a lack of trust in Blair, reflected in their slim lead in the latest opinion poll.
Castle cops get chop, reports The Sun, following up the story of a security breach by the paper's journalists at Windsor Castle ahead of the royal wedding.
The Mirror rather graphically illustrates the report that Charles and Camilla are to repent for their sins after their civil ceremony on Saturday.
And the Daily Express also goes with the royal repentance, the couple having chosen a prayer dating back to the 16th century for their marriage blessing.
Coming up in the sport with Rob Curling, we have a reaction to Newcastle winning in the UEFA Cup.
And why Chelsea's relationship with the people who run European football may be about to improve.
Northwest of England at election time. Sky News is covering the election from Rosendale and Darwin throughout the campaign. We're here to get the inside track on how the nation will vote. We'll bring you instant reaction to the election issues of the day. The people here will give you an insight into what Britain really thinks. Vote 05 on the news channel of the year. Your vote, your choice. Sky News.
Sing a rainbow. Australia. A different light.
Is Tropicana. Nothing added, nothing taken away.
Check on the sport now. Here's Rob.
Thanks very much indeed. Newcastle have won the first leg of their UEFA Cup quarter-final tie with Sporting Lisbon at St James's Park. Alan Shearer got the only goal of the game, although he did see one ruled out for a free kick being taken too quickly. In the other quarter-final, CSKA Moscow beat Auxerre 4-0. Austria Vienna and Parma fought out a 1-1 draw, while Villarreal went down at home to AZ Alkmaar by 2-1. But at St James's Park, it was a familiar face that led the way.
There was no place in the starting 11 for Lee Bowyer, but Kieran Dyer was quickly in the thick of things as Sporting Lisbon came to St James's Park for a third time this season. Alan Shearer had the ball in the net from Laurent Robert on 34 minutes, but the free kick had beaten the referee's whistle. 3 minutes later, though, there was to be no dispute as Shearer made acres of space to head his 11th UEFA Cup goal of the season. Rui George came close to levelling the game, but Newcastle were worthy of their half-time lead. Dyer pulled up early in the second half and was replaced by Lee Bowyer. Both got a standing ovation. Another second half substitute, keeper Steve Harper, ensured Newcastle didn't give up an away goal. James Milner had an excellent chance to extend Newcastle's advantage for the second leg next Thursday. But it stayed 1-0, Graham Souness 90 minutes away from leading Newcastle to successive UEFA Cup semi-finals. Tony Campbell, Sky News.
We're pleased to get it out of the way, really. We've not played particularly well tonight, but it was a nervous affair for us. You know, we've had a very stressful week, and I'm just glad to get the 90 minutes of football out of the way.
We know that they have to come out now and they have to score, and in doing so hopefully they'll leave one or two gaps at the back which we can exploit. Their keeper takes chances. On another night he would have been punished tonight for a chance that he took. So if we can get in amongst them and get stuck in again like we did tonight, then we'll have a great chance.
The row between Chelsea and Barcelona has taken a new twist. Chelsea's accusation that Frank Rijkaard spoke to referee Anders Frisk during their Champions League match appears to have been backed up. A report from UEFA's venue director stated that the Barcelona coach did indeed try to contact Frisk several times with his players or coaching staff during the game. New Portsmouth manager Alain Perrin is confident that he can avoid relegation. Perrin has signed a 2-year deal and has said that he wants to keep striker Yakuba at the club.
Already the Pompey fans are calling him Reggie Perrin after the TV character that ran into the sea in despair and then disappeared. But Alain Perrin is out to ensure that Pompey don't disappear from the Premiership.
I think the situation is not very difficult. It is more difficult for other clubs. So it's an opportunity for me to come now because I can know the players and prepare the next season. So, but we have 4 points to do it for the other teams, and I am here to give my experience from Marseille and to get more points as possible until the end of the season.
Perrin is Pompey's third boss this season. He takes over with just 7 games left and admits he knows nothing about Charlton, the next opponents. So is this a panic move?
I'm confident. I'm full of confidence with
all of us around here will give him full support. We have a good players, and you know, there is no. Let me tell you, there is no guarantee. But when I looked at other candidates and other people I could bring, I turned out to him as the number one.
Perrin will get help from the former Spurs boss, David Pleat.
I won't impose myself in any way. I'm right in the background. I won't be here much at all, if at all. But I'm on the end of a phone, and I will give any advice that Alan requires at any time about anything.
Coach Joe Jordan will help Perrin on the 7-game run-in. Jordan and Velimir Zajic have been holding the fort for 18 games, but after just 16 points from the last 54 and 5 from the last 36, change was needed, and Pompey hope that Reggie can prevent relegation. Jeremy Langdon, Sky News, Eastleigh.
Now then, the leaders may be enjoying the Masters as the first round of the first golfing major of the year develops, but former champion Nick Faldo is out. He's withdrawn with injury, suffering back spasms after just 8 holes. Currently there's a 4-way tie, that leaderboard just slightly out of date now, between Radif Goose and Chris DiMarco, who's moved up into the joint lead with Stuart Appleby and Vijay Singh. They're all on 2 under. The little-known American Ryan Palmer held the outright lead over a number of early holes, although he slipped back now, having dropped a couple of shots. In fact, he's tied with reigning champion Phil Mickelson in a vast group of players on 1 under approaching the turn, while many people's favourite for the green jacket this year, Ernie Els, is making heavy weather of his opening round. A short while ago, he had slipped to 3 over after 7. Well, as for Palmer, 28-year-old Texan making his Masters debut, he's gone well so far, having birdies on the 12th, 14th and 15th, having started on the 10th. Hartlefield starting on the 10th in an attempt to ease the backlog caused by the weather, but he has now slipped back, as I say. But Britain's Luke Donald on his Masters debut has got himself among the leaders thanks to some good putting, and saw himself up near the top on 2 under at one stage. Another good Brit who was right up at the top of the leaderboard, David Howell, has slipped back as well. But while he's had 2 bogeys, he's also had 2 good birdies, including this at the tricky 180-yard par 3-6. Beautifully judged putt from him. Lee Westwood is even par. It's been a little bit up and down for him so far, but some good shots for him into the bargain as well. Not quite so good for Tiger Woods. This putt helping him slip down the field. This eagle putt running off the 13th, his 4th hole, after he had started on the 10th, going into Rays Creek. He then ran up a bogey to go to 2 over par, although he has started to pull his game back now. Now then, it could be more than injury that keeps Johnny Wilkinson out of this summer's Lions Tour. Experts are concerned that thanks to his injury problems and huge earning potential, he may be uninsurable. Now, the Newcastle fly half has been struggling with injury since England's World Cup win over Australia in November 2003, but it was still hoped he'd be fit to tour New Zealand with the Lions. Now, with some of their players retiring at the end of the season, Leicester Tigers will be looking to recruit this summer. But one man who won't be moving to Welford Road is Serge Betson. The French flanker had a highly public visit to the club a few months ago, but has now signed a 3-year contract with his current club, Biarritz. Staying with rugby, Munster's new coach next season is to be their old coach. Declan Kidney is to leave Leinster with immediate effect to return to Munster on a 3-year contract. In his last spell, he guided them to 2 Heineken Cup finals. The plans for 9 of the 10 Formula One teams to race in a different series in 2008 are being maintained. The teams, with the exception of Ferrari and 5 of the car makers, are to boycott a meeting with Max Mosley, the head of World Motorsport's governing body, on April the 18th, which was to discuss rule changes for the 2008 season. Amir Khan's final amateur fight against the man who beat him at the Olympics won't now take place on April the 30th. A spokesman for Mario Kindelan has said that the proposed date in Bolton is absolutely impossible, but the Cuban is keen to fight Khan, perhaps sometime in the summer. And that's all the sport for now. There will, of course, be more a little later.
Thanks very much indeed, Rob. Taking a look at the top stories for you this hour, the government has announced that MG Rover is going into receivership after it failed to strike a deal with a Chinese car manufacturer. The firm employs 6,000 people at its Longbridge plant, and more than 20,000 other jobs are thought to rely on it.
Thousands of mourners are preparing to spend the night in the open in Rome ahead of the Pope's funeral tomorrow. Tonight, the doors of the Basilica were closed after an estimated 2 million people had paid their last respects to the pontiff.
Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles will officially repent their sins after they marry. The passage of penitence will be read at the chapel blessing.
Still to come tonight on Sky News, what the government minister and the union leader had to say tonight as Rover called in the receivers.
Heavens! I forgot to renew the car insurance. Must telephone the broker at once. Telephone, dear? We're not in the dark ages. This is a job for Mr. Mouse. By going online to esure.com, the mouse cuts out the middleman and could save us a tidy sum. What a clever little mouse. I bought him some cheese. Calm down, dear. It's not a real mouse. Oh, I think he's asleep. esure.com. Great value car insurance at the click of a mouse.
Catherine récita à voix basse le poème qu'elle aimait tant. Jean lui décrit les tableaux qu'il voyait en rêve. Et dans ses songes, il lui envoya un baiser invisible.
So, you saw a masked man?
Aye.
On a horse?
Aye.
And he did this with his sword?
Aye.
Shouting, and I quote, broadband from Tiscali for just $15.99 a month, with modem and connection free. So, did you notice anything else unusual?
Well, $15.99 is very cheap for broadband.
For broadband from just $15.99, call Tiscali now on 0800 107 9000.
Seat TDI, same fuel, different reaction.
Autoemoción.
Sunday to White Hart Lane and the Bernabeu. It's hot. Real Madrid versus Barcelona.
This is the biggest game in the world.
Will Barca close in on the La Liga title? But first, Shearer.
One of English football's greatest goal scorers.
What can Spurs do when the goal machine is in town?
El Clásico.
Ford Super Sunday and Spanish football with San Miguel. Sunday from 3, Sky Sports 1.
More now on developments at MG Rover. This was the statement earlier tonight by the Trade and Industry Secretary, Patricia Hewitt.
Tonight, MG Rover has announced that the board has decided to call in the receivers. This is a devastating blow to everybody involved, the workers and their families, the company's suppliers and the wider community. And our thoughts are with them tonight. Everybody recognised that a partnership with SIAC, the Chinese company, was critical to the future of MG Rover. And that is why MG Rover, the government and the trade unions worked tirelessly around the clock to secure this deal.
That was Patricia Hewitt, and this was the reaction from Tony Woodley, leader of the Transport and General Workers Union, to that announcement.
5 years ago, when BMW walked away from Rover, we all understood that there was a limited period of time with which we were to find a partner, new investment and indeed new models that would secure the long-term future of Longbridge. We were all confident that Shanghai Automotive was that partner, but unfortunately, in spite of, as Patricia said, the government being prepared to put £110 million in to give assistance, in spite of a 25-minute call from the Prime Minister to the Premier of China last evening, and in spite of the directors of the company putting £10 million of their own money in to give assistance, unfortunately, this has resulted still in negotiations having broken down. The unions now are, as Patricia said, fighting to preserve car manufacturing at the plant, and we will be working with the government to try our best to minimise job losses amongst our members.
Well, a slightly unclear picture emerging of the status of MG Rover tonight. Julie Kirkbride, MP for Bromsgrove, which includes part of the Longbridge plant, is on the phone to talk to us now about what she thinks about tonight's announcement. You're furious?
Well, I'm absolutely furious. I'm equally devastated because obviously I represent many of the people at the car plant, and I'm a Midlands MP, and this is a dreadful and bitter blow that this should be happening. But on top of that, we have this extraordinary situation where the Secretary of State, Patricia Hewitt, seems to have announced that the company is going to administration when the directors, shortly thereafter, have made an announcement where that is certainly not the case at all. It may well end up being that the government, in the form of Patricia Hewitt, has pushed the company into administration prematurely. It doesn't seem to me the role of a government minister to announce that a private company has gone into administration. This is a matter for the board of directors, who are clearly facing a very difficult situation. But the role of the government tonight, I have to say, leaves a lot to be desired in terms of its competence at dealing with what is very clearly a crisis for us here in the Midlands.
Very many emails coming in to exactly what has happened at MG Rover tonight. Kev Sampson, one of our viewers, has emailed us with the suggestion that perhaps the government's jumped the gun, or maybe the director, the chairman, who's in Shanghai at the moment, made the decision but didn't tell the directors. Perhaps on such an awful night for the West Midlands, there's just confusion.
Well, there's very definitely confusion, there's no doubt about that. But here we are being told that the government has done everything possible, that the Prime Minister has intervened, that Gordon Brown has been to China to deal with it, that the very best officials from the DTI have been sent to try and negotiate a deal. We have to assume that there's some level of competence being attached to this negotiation. And yet there we have, in a very hastily arranged press conference, Patricia Hewitt, the Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, announcing that the company is going into administration, when that is not what the company themselves are saying.
Let me interrupt you there, because to be absolutely clear, what Patricia Hewitt said tonight was that the government and unions will now work with the administrator to try to secure car manufacturing at Longbridge. That isn't quite the same thing.
Well, I think it amounts to the same thing. I mean, I don't think now is the time to have a semantic dispute when 6,000 jobs directly are affected and some 20,000 others across the Midlands. The fact is, what on earth was the government minister doing, appearing on programmes, making premature statements about a situation which is clearly very grave, whilst at the same time trying to reassure us that they are doing their very best to stop the situation from happening in the first place.
What's your understanding of what exactly has happened tonight?
Well, it's difficult for me to know, to be honest, because I think probably my understanding of the situation has been gleaned from what I've seen on the television and the various statements that have been made by the interested parties. It clearly got to a difficult situation today with the stoppage of production at the plant, and clearly the Chinese have a lot of problems with the deal in terms of Rover being able to survive for the 2 years it would take before the new cars were going to come into production. But even the statements from the Chinese today will need an explanation tomorrow morning, because they're talking about grants not being made available. And yet today on the floor of the House of Commons, when I asked Patricia Hewitt about this very situation, she was very clear that the £100 million grant had been made available. And yet even that statement appears to be being challenged by the Chinese tonight.
I can tell you that within the last few seconds, Julie, that the government has rejected your statement flatly, saying that the final statement that Patricia Hewitt came out with tonight, that you so heavily criticised, has been agreed at the highest level with MG Rover.
Well, all I can say is that having been watching the television myself tonight, I saw what Patricia Hewitt said, and I saw a few minutes later a statement that was officially authorised by the directors of Phoenix Venture Holdings, who are the directors of Rover, contradicting that statement, making it very clear that as far as they were concerned it had not gone into administration, that the accountants are going to be brought in tomorrow to have a look at the books. And so two statements in a very short space of time were very contradictory. We all know that the government spin machine will be in overdrive at this point, and so it doesn't surprise us that the government, as usual, is trying to insist that black is white. But tonight, the situation of chaos and completely disgracefully shambolic management of this issue can be laid very firmly at the door of the government. And my constituents are pretty disgusted.
Julie Kirkbride, thanks for talking to us live on Sky News tonight.
Well, the bad news for Longbridge came too late to impact on today's electioneering. It was tax and how much of it we'll have to pay, which formed the battleground between the parties today.
Tony Blair and Gordon Brown appeared together at a poster launch to attack the Conservatives, claiming the Tories were planning massive spending cuts.
Michael Howard hit back, saying if Labour were to win next month, taxes would rise. Labour, of course, says that's not true.
Where is he? Where is Howard? Let me at him.
John Prescott got his punch in early. The Deputy Prime Minister was campaigning in a store known for its price cuts, but it's the alleged Tory secret agenda for spending cuts which have got him on his toes. Last month, Michael Howard had a pre-election wobble, which he moved quickly and ruthlessly to stabilise. He sacked MP Howard Flight for suggesting that the Conservatives have hidden plans to cut spending if elected. Flight's replacement is Nick Herbert, but Herbert is now alleged to have made similar remarks in an article.
So I've said completely the wrong thing.
And so Mr. Howard is again having to move quickly to dispel the idea that he's saying one thing, planning another.
What Nick Herbert said in his article 2 years ago, which was a warning to the party based on a rumour or a whisper, as he described it, was a warning to the party not to do this sort of thing. He was quite right.
It's a beautiful day.
But that wasn't going to stop Tony Blair from launching a new poster campaign and ripping into the Tories' economic plans.
People will have to decide. Do they want this man, Gordon Brown, the most successful Chancellor this country has seen for many, many years, or do they want to change that for Mr. Letwin and his untried, untested economic plan that would do so much damage?
The Tony and Gordon show was at its best here, almost joint leadership. The Chancellor even gets his own poster, but you couldn't ask him about it.
Why are you standing in the way? Get out of the way, please. Why are you standing in the way? Hello? Hello?
Labour's media minders were minded to stand in front of the media at the end to prevent questions. Oh, and the poster campaign? Sky News asked Labour how many would be going up around the country, an expensive business. The reply, we don't know. So it's at least 2 then.
I know you've been busy, you've been doing good things.
Back in hospital, Mr. Howard moved on to MRSA. His mother-in-law died of the bug. He blamed Labour policies and made a remarkable charge.
Patients are dying because of Mr. Blair's targets.
So much for not campaigning negatively, but that was personal. More to come. Tim Marshall, Sky News.
Still to come on Sky News this evening, what's in the morning papers. We'll be reviewing the first editions with the Times' Ruth Gledhill. Stay with us for that.
Something is lurking deep in the airwaves.
What kind are they?
Big ones.
With a bite radius about a yard across.
Smile, you son of a...
Just when you thought it was safe to channel surf.
I felt he had swallowed me.
If you panic, you're dead. It's shark season on Sky. Circling a channel near you.
40 years! I've had my no-claim bonus for 40 years!
Oh dear. If only he'd insured his car with More Than.
Yeah.
Unlike other insurers, when you protect your maximum no-claim bonus with More Than, we promise to keep it protected for life.
That's lucky.
However many claims you make. And you could save up to 40% when you switch.
Yeah. 40! That's more than lucky.
To protect your maximum no-claim bonus for life, call us now or buy online at morethan.com.
Being a woman, I never worried about being at risk from a heart attack. I thought they only happened to men. Although I have been trying to exercise and lose some weight, and I had this terrible shock. I turned 55. I read that your risk of a heart attack could be as high as 1 in 7 if you're a woman who's 55 and a bit overweight. Like me.
Zocor Heart Pro is the single most effective product you can buy to reduce furring up in your arteries and so reduce your risk. Ask your pharmacist. Help protect your heart.
My bank gave me a great mortgage deal 2 years ago. It started low, but it's now about to shoot up! And they think I can't move because it's too much hassle. My bank is having a laugh.
There is another way. If your mortgage deal with Halifax, Abbey or Cheltenham and Gloucester is ending, talk to NatWest. We'll lower your new monthly repayments or give you £100.
As a fashion designer, precision is the most important thing in many ways. Without precision, my life would fall apart. Nature aspires to perfection. Nature achieves perfection. I look at nature, nature looks back at me and says, yes, you too have achieved precision and perfection.
Oh, it's already running, sir.
I can't hear it.
Apparently not.
The all-new Ford Focus.
Good evening. Top stories this hour. The government has announced that MG Rover is going into receivership after it failed to strike a deal with a Chinese car manufacturer. The firm employs 6,000 people at its Longbridge plant, and more than 20,000 other jobs are thought to rely on it.
Thousands of mourners are preparing to spend the night in the open in Rome tonight, ahead of the Pope's funeral tomorrow. And tonight the doors of the Basilica were closed after an estimated 2 million people had paid their last respects to the Pontiff.
Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles will officially repent their sins after they marry. The passage of penitence will be read at the chapel blessing.
Well, let's take a look now at the morning newspapers, and we'll start with The Independent. And as expected, the demise of Rover makes the front pages. Independent illustrating over 100 years of Rover car making.
The Guardian too leads with the troubles at MG Rover, suggesting that the car manufacturer will have no option but to close. It also looks to the Pope's funeral and the flood of dignitaries due to attend.
Rover finally stalls, proclaims the Times. The car maker's woes, again the lead there. The picture there of a mass of pilgrims gathered in Rome ahead of the Pope's funeral tomorrow.
MG Rover also dominates the front page of the Telegraph with the halting of production at his Longbridge plant, and it suggests that Labour has been hit by a lack of trust in Blair, reflected in their slim lead in the latest opinion poll.
Castle cops get chop, reports The Sun rather triumphantly, following up the story of a security breach by the paper's journalists at Windsor ahead of the royal wedding.
The Mirror graphically illustrates the report that Charles and Camilla are to repent for their sins after their civil ceremony on Saturday.
And the Daily Express also goes with the royal repentance, the couple having chosen a prayer dating back to the 16th century for their marriage blessing.
And joining us now to review the first edition is Ruth Gledhill, religious correspondent with The Times. Good to see you, Ruth. Good evening.
Good evening to you.
And, well, Rover, it has to be to start us off, isn't it?
Yes, another difficult night for the papers, with the story changing as the night progresses. The first edition then taken over by the news that it had gone into administration, then now we've got a denial from Rover that it has. But I started out as an industrial correspondent on the Birmingham Post more than 20 years ago.
Oh, you know the area well.
Yes, and even then BL, British Leyland, was lurching from crisis to crisis, and so occasionally you'd write the story saying it was about to close and you'd get immense complaints. It's taken 20 years for it to happen, but it seems as though it's finally come to this.
But British Leyland was a crisis, wasn't it?
Well, totally. Yes, no one would deny that. But here, the wonderful mark of Rover has been caught up in a similar type crisis, and it's just a tragedy, a disaster for the whole region, actually.
How does the coverage differ between the main newspapers this evening?
We've got the Guardian covering that, but also some of the other papers going on from there to the Telegraph is also going big on the Rover story. But then on the Times we start to see a little bit about the Pope. moving on to the funeral and the will that he's published today, showing that he died a complete pauper, but also showing that he considered resigning about 5 years ago, and this will increase the debate, no doubt, on whether popes in the future should resign to try and prevent future vacuums of leadership at the head of the church, as we've had over the last 2 years while he's been ill. But some of the most interesting stories for me on the front pages concern the royal wedding.
Ah, yes. Yes.
And here we have the Mirror. We haven't actually got the paper here, but we've got the front page with this dramatic picture of Charles and Camilla wearing the cuckold's horns, or the cuckolder's horns, whichever way one looks at it.
Oh, no, the devil! I thought they were the devil's horns.
Oh, the devil's horns. Well, those are the same thing, really, aren't they?
Well, the singer's got a devil's tail on the end of the D and horns on the S.
Yes.
Very naughty Mirror.
Yes, but it's quite amazing that it's taken this, a prayer that was drawn up originally in 1549 and then is in the 1662 Book of Common Prayer. That prayer should be now on the front pages of our tabloids is a triumph for the gospel, some would say, or simply just incredibly amazing. But there's just one little phrase in the prayer. It talks about sinning most grievously against thy divine majesty. Now, I bet young people who read that will think they're talking about the Queen there, not about God at all. And I think it's a really telling illustration there of how these mores that people thought had died out, that the church was irrelevant, people thought by now into the new millennium no one would be interested in religion, how there it is on the front pages of the papers along with the Pope, these two massive stories with a strong religious element.
What do you think it is that's made Charles and Camilla choose such a strongly worded prayer? I mean, bewailing their wickedness, for heaven's sake. It's a very strong language.
Yes, we mustn't forget that the whole congregation will say this prayer, not just the royal couple. So the Queen herself will also say these words, and the Archbishop will say them. It's the general confession that the whole congregation says. But Charles is lay patron of the Prayer Book Society. He's an absolute lover, an ardent lover of traditional language, as in the prayer book. And he would have chosen that because he would have wanted to have been true to his roots within the church, his liturgical roots. He will one day be Supreme Governor of the Church of England, or God willing, all going well. And I think that we have a sign here of what kind of King and Supreme Governor he will be, in that he will want to hold on to and preserve and value the traditions of this country, and I think that's a very reassuring sign. And it's a reassuring sign that they are willing to stand up there and say these dramatic, ancient Christian words in this way.
OK, Windsor, and of course that security breach again.
Well, yes, I was down at Clarence House today.
Name dropper.
For the press conference. It's not at all like it sounds.
Just popped in.
And we, unusually, I gather, not a regular visitor as part of the press corps, but we had to queue for a long time outside in the miserable weather, in the rain and the drizzle. And then they made us produce 2 security passes with photographs on, plus a letter of invitation. And then we were properly frisked, and our bags were gone through. Everything was taken out of my bag and gone through step by step. And this was obviously, designed to prevent me carrying a bomb in my handbag, as if I would into Clarence House. But I think the Sun had made them want to, either be extra careful about security or teach us all a lesson.
A little too late, actually, after what happened yesterday with the Sun newspaper.
Well, quite. And 2 of the police responsible, I think, as the Sun reports, have now left the service.
OK. Now, elections we can't ignore, and many groups are important, aren't they? Not least the Muslim vote.
Yes, well, in The Guardian we have a very interesting story. Roy Hattersley has gone back to his old constituency, and he finds what he describes as a mood of defiance. And here we have very interesting developments in the Muslim community here. And here we see how, just as the Cardinal indicated, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor indicated that Labour can no longer take the Catholic vote for granted. So now we have Roy Hattersley warning that Labour can no longer take the Muslim vote for granted. And Muslims generally, the Labour politicians, including Ken Livingstone, are really assiduous in courting the Muslim vote. But the constituency has been changing. There's a lot of discontent about the war in Iraq, and there's a feeling that Islamophobia is growing in the country, and that some of the what the government has been doing has maybe not been helping that. There's also quite a lot of discontent at the dropping of the law, the proposed law on religious discrimination from the Serious Crime Bill in order to get it through Parliament. And although the government has said if it gets back in, it will make sure this legislation goes through, trust is a big thing in this coming election, and here we have a question of trust again. And in addition, a lot of Muslims have legitimate reasons to bring relatives over from their countries of origin, maybe legitimate marriages, that kind of thing, and a lot of them are having problems with immigration and the tightening up of immigration controls. So I think all added together, plus added to the increased prosperity of the community, and maybe they're starting to look beyond the Labour, the natural government, to other parties who might be able to meet their needs in the new millennium. So I think here it's very interesting, and it would be very interesting to see in this coming election what does happen with the Muslim vote.
Most certainly will. Ruth Gledhill, good to see you. Many thanks for all that, and quite a good selection of stories you had to choose from today. Plenty of choice there. Many thanks.
Some confusion tonight as to whether or not the receivers have been called into MG Rover, but it's certain that the writing is on the wall. 100 years of car manufacturing in the West Midlands does seem to be coming to a close. We'll have more details for you coming up in our next hour of news. Stay with us on Sky.
Need a little soothing sometimes. The fragrance of lavender and chamomile, the soothing fabric conditioner in new bold 2-in-1.
Icicle hit me when we were caving in the Alps. Nice. Burn. Piece of wild boar we were roasting on a fire. Popped off and seared me. It was a hornet's nest. Sting, 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 sting. Let's have a look. Portuguese shark. Scratched all the way up there. When we were down by the river, man-eating trout bit off my leg. Now I've got a wooden leg. Tarantula. Mountain lion.
The new 7-seat Nissan Pathfinder.
Ooh.
Tell better stories.
Don't you recognize me? I am you 50 years from now. You know, you'll see and do some amazing things in your life. You're going to travel far across time, space, and there are people who will help to organize your life. They'll play a big part in your future. Ah, Victor, you know you're gonna have a good life. I'm sorry, a big nose.
You're the one. CK1.
Calvin Klein. So, the same camera, same sort of price, but this one's got a zoom.
No, I'll have that one.
Given the choice, wouldn't you prefer more for your money?
And Daddy's gonna come in a bit closer. Ooh.
Oh. Broadband from BT is now double the speed and still from just £17.99. Call 0800 317 316 or visit bt.com today.
Hey, did I tell you about this thing from Sky?
Well, every time you recommend it to one of your friends and they join up,
you both get £30 of vouchers. What for?
It's their way of saying thanks for recommending it.
So if you ring them up, tell them I was the one that told you about it, we both get a little something.
Introduce a friend. Ask them to call 08702 404 004.